Nou is dit tyd om te fokus op wêreld-beroertedag wat vandag aan die gang is. En Prof Pamela Naidoo van die Heart Foundation kuier vanoggend saam om te vertel hoe hulle bewusmaking oor hierdie spesifieke onderwerp of kwessie skep. So good morning Prof Naidoo, and thank you so much for joining us on die Groot Ontbyt.
Good morning, Maura. Baie dankie. Yeah.
Goed, maar miskien kan ons dan nou sommer begin deur te vra waaroor presies hierdie dag gaan.
Yes. So I'm not fluent in Afrikaans, but I did understand your question. So if you could just please revert back to English for the question.
No problem. So I would just like to focus on the day for now, and maybe just tell us, what it's all about and what it means to the Heart Foundation specifically.
Correct, yeah. Baie dankie for that question. So essentially World Stroke Day, which is celebrated on the 29th of October globally. It's driven by the World Stroke Organization, of which we are a member. And essentially it is to highlight the importance of being aware of stroke and its risk factors, because the burden of stroke in South Africa and globally is pretty high. It's one of the largest or highest burdens of disease in the world, actually. And many people die from the condition, but also become quite severely disabled from it. So the idea is to drive the awareness. It's actually over a week, but it culminates in today, which is the 29th. And it's also to make people aware that actually it's preventable. So, if you put your mind to the risk factors for stroke, you're able to change your behaviors, to adopt healthier behaviors so that you can prevent having a stroke in the first place.
Prof Pamela, it's your name here. Just to inform people, main causes of a stroke. What causes it?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. Thanks for that. So you see, it is a little complicated, but what I will do is to make it, I'll give it to you in sort of bite-sized pieces so that people can see that it's not so overwhelming. You can do something about it. So essentially, you need to think about the causes for stroke, or what drives stroke, as having two major causes. One is that there's a blood clot in the brain. So a blood clot can happen in any vessel in the body, but it then travels to the brain. And once you have a clot in your blood vessel in the brain, it actually causes a stroke. And obviously, if you think about the function of the brain, it's related to your day-to-day functioning, your ability to move, to talk, to laugh, to feel emotion, to think well, and so on and so forth. So when you have a clot in the brain, and around that area, you have, the cells die, and the quality of the brain cells are affected. So it's a more common cause. A less common cause for stroke is what we call hemorrhagic stroke. And what happens here is that you have a blood vessel that bursts in the brain, but you have a similar outcome because the bleeding into that area of the brain causes the brain to malfunction.
I would just like to ask, because most people are concerned about the fact that that this might cause permanent brain damage. So what would the answer be within that regard?
It's a totally correct assumption, except that it depends on the severity of your stroke. So, it depends on a few things. One, it depends on the severity. So many people have a mild stroke, which is completely reversible and people recover. And then maybe think about it as mild, moderate, and severe. But the key thing is that if you get the person that you suspect is having a stroke to a medical emergency unit on time, you can actually largely reverse the long-term damage from a stroke. Look, there will always be those very severe cases, but you can't really help that. But yes, largely you can prevent very severe post-stroke, I would say, dysfunction of the body, because it affects your movement, it affects your ability to think, it affects your speech, your ability to swallow. So it's quite a debilitating condition post-stroke if it's severe.
Professor Naidoo, we still have a lot of questions left, so we'll continue with this discussion right after the news. Vandag is wêreld-beroertedag en professor Pamela Naidoo van die Heart Foundation kuier vanoggend steeds saam om te vertel hoe hulle bewusmaking oor hierdie onderwerp skep. So, Professor Naidoo, thanks again for joining us.
Sure.
Professor Naidoo, is there anything that we can do to prevent the risks? And I also want to find out, can I change my diet perhaps to lower the risk?
Yes, so yes to both those questions. So there's many, I would say I would call it health behaviors. There are many behaviors one can change to improve your overall health, but also to largely prevent the risk of having a stroke. So let's start, and the dietary factors are related to what I'm going to say now. So, let's put that all into what we call modifiable risk factors. And by modifiable, it basically means you can change it. So let's just start with dietary factors. So hypertension or high blood pressure is one of the key risk factors for stroke. And we do know that salt or excessive salt or sodium intake can increase your blood pressure to very dangerous levels. And so one of the things you can do is to watch, the level of consumption of salt, but also sugar and fats in your diet. So that's the one important risk factor. The second risk factor would be tobacco smoking. Now, we know that tobacco smoking, it's unlike salt and sugar and fats. You can't say to somebody, reduce your smoking to 1 cigarette a day. It doesn't work like that. You really have to work towards zero smoking habit, basically. Particularly tobacco is very harmful to the body. Alcohol consumption should also be reduced. And then a very key factor, which we're finding more and more in studies that are done globally, and that is if you have a good diet or a healthy food choice overall, and you move more. So not necessarily going to a gym and spending loads of money on particular types of exercise equipment. But if you just simply move around, don't be a couch potato. Don't lie on the couch and watch TV all day. Is to be active. Walking is a great form of exercise. And then lastly, I would say it's some of the issues that we can't really totally control, but we can contribute to controlling it. And that is environmental pollution. There's more and more evidence to show that your environment has to have enabling factors. So if you're consistently inhaling unpolluted air, that's also going to affect your circulatory system. So in other words, your blood flow through your body, because remember that the more you have oxygenated blood, so the cleaner the air that you breathe, the better is your body, and your brain and your heart is going to be much better in the way it functions.
Prof Naidoo, there was a story last Saturday. Willem Coetzee, 29 years old, rugby player in Bloemfontein, and it was they say it was a blood clot that was in his jaw, and when they tackled him, it came loose, and then it went through the brain. And we're thinking of the family still because he's still in serious condition, and it was worrying with the stats to say that 1 in 4 adults over the age of 25 will have a stroke in their lifetime. But what's the signs so you know there's something wrong, or does it always come as a surprise?
Yes, it can come as a surprise, but, blessings to the rugby player. Hope, it's not the first rugby player, by the way. So rugby is, I just want to dispense with that quickly because it is a bit worrying. Rugby can lead to many severe injuries. But the symptoms of a stroke, unfortunately, if you're having a stroke, you wouldn't really realize it. So key is the people around you. We're running a program also with little children. So I would go as far as to say from the young children to older adults, we all need to know that what are the symptoms of a stroke, because you might be sitting next to somebody who you suspect is having a stroke. And it's very simple. We have an acronym that we call FAST. The first 3, F, A, and S, basically those are the symptoms. And I'll tell you quickly what those are, or what the symptoms are. So F is for face. Now, remember always that a stroke affects one side of the body. It's either the left side or the right side. So if you find that somebody's face is drooping on the one side, then you immediately may suspect that this could be a stroke. And it could be one symptom or more symptoms. But if you have any one of these symptoms, you immediately take that person to a hospital. The second symptoms is A for arms. And so if you ask that particular person to lift up both arms, and one arm flops down involuntarily, so, they have no control over that movement, you can then suspect that could be a stroke. And then the very critical one is speech. So, we often use like a very common term, say, oh, stop talking gibberish. And literally the person who's having a stroke will come across like they're talking gibberish because they're unintelligible. You can't understand a word they're saying. It's like a different language altogether. And that's because the speech center in the brain is affected. So they might be thinking logically, but the production of the speech is not logical at all. So those are the three important symptoms. And the T in FAST basically stands for time. And brain, or time is brain, we say, because if you do not get the person to a hospital emergency center on time, you can lose more of your brain function around the area that you have the clot or the hemorrhage.
Professor Naidoo, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us this morning. Unfortunately, we don't have any time left, but thank you so much.
My pleasure indeed.
En dit was dan Prof Pamela Naidoo en sy is van die Heart Foundation.